Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back in time. Not to a grand battlefield or a royal court, but to a small, dusty shop in a colonial American town. You can almost feel the chill in the air, a dampness that seeps into your bones, and you're not feeling well. Your head aches, your throat is scratchy, and the world of modern medicine is centuries away. The only place to turn is the local apothecary, a place of both hope and, let's be honest, some pretty questionable science. Statistically speaking, you probably won't survive this experience, but hey, that's part of the charm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where and what time you're all listening from, so drop your city and local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see our little community of night owls. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cobblestones are more likely, the packed, muddy earth of the street are uneven beneath your worn leather shoes. It's a brisk afternoon in the mid-1700s, and the air carries a symphony of unfamiliar smells. Wood smoke from 100 chimneys, the metallic temps of a nearby blacksmith, the ever-present aroma of horses. But you're not here for the ambience. You've been nursing a cough for a week, a deep, chesty rattle that keeps you up at night. And your wife, after exhausting all her kitchen remedies, finally insisted you see the apothecary. You pull your woolen coat tighter and push open the heavy wooden door, a small bell tinkling softly, announcing your arrival. The change in atmosphere is immediate and overwhelming. The air inside is thick, a complex tapestry of scents that makes you pause on the threshold. It's not an unpleasant smell, not entirely, but it is profoundly strange. There's the dry, floral scent of lavender and chamomile, the sharp, medicinal punch of camphor, and a faint, sweet smell of licorice root. Underneath it all is a dusty, earthy aroma, the smell of dried roots and soil, mingled with the faint, astringent whiff of something like sulfur or vinegar. It's the scent of the earth, but catalogued, tamed, and put on a shelf. Your eyes slowly adjust to the dim interior. The shop is small, probably no bigger than a modern living room. Sunlight struggles to pierce through the multi-paned bay window. At the front, it's glass, wavy and imperfect, distorting the view of the street into a wobbly watercolor painting. In this window, you see two enormous, ornate glass vessels, one filled with a vibrant red liquid and the other a deep blue. These are show globes, the universal symbol of your trade. Historians still argue whether the iconic show globes in the window were merely decorative, a symbol of the trade like a barber's pole, or if they served a more practical purpose, like concentrating lamplight onto the workspace after dark. For you, in this moment, they just add to the mystery, glowing like giant, alien jewels. The walls are lined from floor to ceiling with dark wood shelves, crammed with an astonishing array of containers. There are hundreds of them, large ceramic jars, elegantly labeled in looping, almost illegible Latin script. Small, square-shouldered glass bottles containing liquids of every hue from pale gold to murky brown. There are drawers upon drawers, each with a small brass handle and a label. You can't quite make out. You squint, trying to decipher them. Rad, glycer, fol, menth, pip, cort, peruve. It feels a bit like trying to read a modern doctor's prescription pad, a secret language designed to keep you, the patient, comfortably in the dark. Your gaze drifts over the visible contents. On one shelf, A large glass jar holds a tangle of gnarled, twisted roots that look like wooden claws. In another, you see delicate, dried flowers pressed against the glass. A fat ceramic pot sits on the counter, and you can just see the sheen of a thick, dark ointment inside. High on a shelf near the ceiling, something truly odd catches your eye. A jar containing what looks like a small, coiled snake, perfectly preserved in a yellowish liquid. Nearby, another jar simply labeled Mumia holds a coarse, dark brown powder. You try not to think too hard about what that one might be. Many apothecaries, in a tradition stretching back centuries, also sold goods you might not consider medical. It wouldn't be unusual to find expensive pigments for painters, rare spices for a wealthy family's cook, high-quality wax for sealing letters, or even tobacco, all nestled between the medicines. The floorboards creak behind the high wooden counter that separates the shop from the apothecary's work area. You can't see him yet, but you can hear the soft, rhythmic scrape and crunch of a mortar and pestle. Scrape, crunch, scrape, crunch. It's a strangely soothing sound, a promise of action, of a remedy being prepared. The counter itself is the landscape of organized chaos. A set of brass balanced scales sits gleaming, its delicate pans empty. A few thick, leather-bound books lie open, their pages filled with dense text and anatomical drawings that look both fascinating and slightly horrifying. A stray leaf of some unidentifiable herb lies next to a small, stained porcelain bowl. This is a workshop as much as a shop, a laboratory where the raw materials of nature are transformed into cures, or, at least, what passes for cures. You stand there, a little intimidated, your cough seeming to echo in the dusty silence, waiting for the man of science, the man of mystery to emerge from the shadows. The scraping sound stops. A moment of silence hangs in the air, broken only by your own anxious breathing. Then, a man emerges from a doorway behind the counter. He isn't the ancient, wizened wizard you might have expected. He's a man in his 40s, perhaps with sharp, intelligent eyes that seem to take in your entire state in a single, sweeping glance. He's wiping his hands on a slightly stained linen apron worn over a simple, dark waistcoat and shirt sleeves. His fingers are smudged with dark powder, and there's a faint chemical scent about him that wasn't part of the room's general perfume. He gives you a look so intense you feel he's assessing not just your health, but your creditworthiness and your soul's final destination. "Good day," he says, his voice calm and even. "What brings you in?" You describe your ailment, the persistent cough, the feverish feeling that comes and goes, the weariness in your limbs. He listens patiently, head tilted slightly, never breaking eye contact. He doesn't pull out a stethoscope or a thermometer. Those tools are either not yet invented or not in common use here. Instead, his diagnosis is based on observation and your own account. He gestures for you to come closer to the counter. "Let me see your tongue," he requests, and you comply, feeling a bit foolish. He peers at it for a moment, then looks at the whites of your eyes and the color of your skin. This man before you is not just a dispenser of medicines. In a town like this, he is the entire medical establishment rolled into one slightly stressed-looking individual. First and foremost, he is the pharmacist. His primary role is to do what you heard him doing when you entered, compounding medicines. He is a master of the pharmacopoeia, the official list of medicinal drugs. He knows that the jar, labeled Court Peruve, contains Peruvian bark, a precious powder from a faraway Spanish colony that can break a dangerous fever. This was a mainstream medical fact of the day. One of the few genuinely effective treatments in his arsenal, are specific for the fevers of malaria. He knows how much of it to mix with wine or water, how to grind the chalky lumps of krita into a fine powder for an upset stomach, and how to steep the leaves of fol, menthe pip, peppermint for a soothing tea. His knowledge is a complex blend of botany, chemistry, and tradition. Much of it learned not in a university, but through a long apprenticeship. He likely started as a boy, sweeping these very floors, before learning to read the Latin labels. And, eventually, the secrets of the trade. It was the 18th century equivalent of learning a complex craft from a master, only with more life or death consequences. But his role doesn't end there. He is also the physician. There is no separate doctor's office to visit. He is the one who listens to your symptoms, makes the diagnosis, and decides on the course of treatment. He's your general practitioner. He's the one who will be called to a bedside in the middle of the night if a child's fever spikes or an old man's breathing becomes shallow. His authority in these matters is significant. Historians debate the precise social standing of the colonial apothecary. Was he seen as a respected man of science on par with a clergyman, or more of a skilled tradesman like a silversmith or a cabinet maker? The answer likely varied from town to town, but in this moment, as he holds your potential well-being in his hands, he feels like the most important man in the world. And then there are his other duties, the ones that make you swallow nervously. You notice a heavy, hinged wooden box sitting on a table behind him. He sees you looking at it, and his expression doesn't change. Inside that box, you know, are the tools of a surgeon and a dentist. There are no specialists for these things. If your cough were to worsen and lead to a more serious fluid buildup, he might be the one to perform a minor, desperate procedure. If you had a rotting tooth causing you agony, you wouldn't go to a dentist's office with reclining chairs and gentle music. You'd come right back here, to this shop. He would have you sit on a stool, maybe offer you a swig of rum for courage. And then he'd pull out a terrifying-looking metal instrument called a tooth key to wrench the offending molar from your jaw. It's a bit jarring to think the same person you trust to sell you cinnamon for your apple pie is also the one you'd hire to pull your teeth. He finishes his examination and straightens up, a thoughtful look on his face. A common affliction, he says, his voice betraying nothing. A troublesome humor has become agitated in the chest. He turns his back to you and begins to scan his shelves, his long, ink-stained fingers hovering over the rows of jars and bottles. You watch him, your heart thumping a little faster. You came in for a cough, but you've just been confronted with the full, intimidating scope of this man's profession. He is the gatekeeper of all things medical, from a simple herbal tea to a sharp steel blade. His decision now, his choice of which jars to take down from those crowded shelves, will determine the course of your next few days, and you can only stand and wait, and hope he knows what he's doing. A troublesome humor, he said. The words mean almost nothing to your 21st century ears, perhaps sounding more like a judgment on your personality than a medical diagnosis. You might even be tempted to reply, "Yes, my sense of humor has been a bit off lately," but you wisely keep silent. For the apothecary, however, this isn't vague medical jargon. It is the absolute, unimpeachable truth of how your body works. To him, you are not a complex system of cells, organs, and biochemistry. You are a small, personal universe governed by 4 elemental fluids, the very same theory that has dominated Western medicine since the time of the ancient Greeks. This is the doctrine of the 4 humors, and to understand his cure, you must first understand his science. As the apothecary turns to his shelves, you can almost imagine him mentally consulting the chart that hangs in his mind, a chart that has been the bedrock of medicine for more than 1500 years. This theory, first systemized by the Greek physician Galen in the Roman Empire, holds that your health and even your personality are dictated by the balance of 4 distinct fluids within your body. Every single thing he does next will be based on correcting a perceived imbalance in these fluids. In a way, it's refreshingly simple. Certainly easier than trying to decipher the side effects panel on a modern prescription. The first humor is blood, associated with the element of air and the season of spring. It's considered hot and moist. A person with a healthy amount of blood is said to be sanguine, cheerful, optimistic, and sociable. This is the good stuff, the vital fluid of life, and you generally want a healthy supply of it. The second humor is phlegm. This is your current problem, associated with water and the cold of winter. It is, naturally, cold and moist. An excess of phlegm makes a person phlegmatic, calm, sluggish, and unemotional. To the apothecary, your cough and chesty rattle are clear signs that your body is producing too much cold. Wet phlegm, which is gathering in your lungs and needs to be dealt with. The third is yellow bile. This is the humor of fire and summer, a substance both hot and dry. An abundance of yellow bile creates a choleric temperament, very ambitious and quick to anger, that irritable man down the street who is always yelling at his children. The apothecary would nod knowingly and diagnose him as having an excess of choler. And finally, there is black bile, linked to the element of earth and the melancholy of autumn. This humor is cold and dry. It was believed to be a dark, thick sediment secreted by the spleen. An excess of it results in a melancholic personality, serious, introverted, and prone to sadness. This is the original, named source of what we now call depression, the first scientific explanation for why someone might be perpetually downcast. It's the original diagnosis for having the blues. So, the apothecary's entire goal is not to kill a virus or fight a bacterial infection. Those concepts don't exist yet. His goal is simply to restore your personal equilibrium. Think of your body as a container with 4 liquids that need to be kept at the proper levels. Your container is currently overflowing with phlegm. Therefore, the treatment must be designed to either remove the excess phlegm directly or to counteract its qualities. Since phlegm is cold and wet, he will prescribe remedies that are considered hot and dry. This concept of qualities extended to everything. A cucumber was seen as cold and wet, making it a good food to eat during a hot, dry summer fever. Mustard, on the other hand, was hot and dry, perfect for combating a cold, wet ailment like yours. Scholars still debate how rigidly the average practitioner adhered to every facet of this complex system of correspondences, or if much of it was a kind of intellectual window dressing for treatments based on more practical, handed-down folk experience. But the language of humors was universal. The apothecary turns back to you, holding a small glass bottle and a ceramic jar. We must counteract this cold dampness, he explains, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. He doesn't need your understanding, only your compliance. He is a mechanic of the body, and he believes he has found the stuck valve, the flooded engine. He sees your illness not as an invasion from the outside, but as a failure of your own internal management. You feel a small, involuntary shudder, a mix of cold and apprehension. You've just been diagnosed based on a theory that considers your body to be composed of the same 4 elements as the dirt outside and the fire in the hearth. Now you have to trust this man to balance you back to health using the strange and wonderful contents of his mysterious shop. The apothecary places the 2 containers he selected on the polished wood of the counter. You see now that one is a squat ceramic jar labeled seer, whorehound, and the other is a glass bottle containing the dried, recognizable leaves of peppermint. This is where your treatment begins, not with some arcane mineral or powdered mystery, but with the simple, familiar bounty of the garden. Long before he reaches for the more extreme tools of his trade, the apothecary's first resort is almost always to the world of plants. Many, like him, maintained their own small physic garden behind the shop. A carefully tended plot of green that was as essential to his business as the shelves of imported chemicals. He unscrews the lid of the peppermint jar, and a clean, sharp, wonderfully familiar scent wafts across the counter. It's a comforting smell in this strange place. In his world, peppermint is classified as hot and dry in the 2nd degree. It's a perfect opening move against your cold, wet cough. He'll use it to warm your system, to aid digestion, and honestly, to make whatever else he gives you slightly less disgusting to swallow. You've had peppermint tea yourself, prepared by your wife for a sour stomach. A simple remedy passed down through generations. Next, he turns his attention to the whorehound syrup. The plant itself, white whorehound, is a fuzzy, bitter herb, a member of the mint family. You've seen it growing on dry, disturbed ground. It's not something you'd ever want to eat, but it was perhaps the most famous cough remedy of the era. He explains that the syrup will help loosen the thick phlegm in your chest, allowing you to expel the humor more easily. He might have made the syrup himself, boiling the fresh plant down with honey or raw sugar until it became a thick, dark, potent liquid. This is the ancestor of the modern cough drop, solid proof that for centuries we have subscribed to the deeply held belief that if a medicine tastes truly awful, it must be working wonders. His eyes scan the shelves again, and he reaches for another jar, this one filled with what look like small, dried daisies. This is chamomile, a plant whose reputation for calm has echoed through the ages. He might add a small amount of this to your prescription, not necessarily for the cough itself, but to soothe your feverish agitation and help you sleep. Its gentle warmth is considered restorative. As he works, you realize that his knowledge is like a library of plants. He sees not just a leaf or a flower, but a collection of properties and powers. He might glance at a well-worn book on the counter, a popular herbal like Culpeper's The English Physician. This book was a sensation, a bestseller in the colonies, as it translated the complex arts of medicine and astrology into something a common householder could understand, linking each plant to a planet and a humor. He pulls out his brass scales anathy smell. Its Latin name, Achillea millefolium, supposedly come he moves with a quiet efficiency. His hands, deft and certain, begins to measure out small piles of dried herbs. He might add a pinch of yarrow, a feather-leaved plant with a pungent S from the hero Achilles, who used it to staunch the bleeding of his soldiers' wounds. One assumes he applied it everywhere except, his heel. For you, its purpose would be different. Yarrow is known to make you sweat, and inducing a good sweat was seen as a vital way to open the pores and drive the sickness, the excess humor out of the body. Much of this plant lore was based on this kind of direct, observable effect, but some of it was guided by a stranger, more poetic principle, the doctrine of signatures. This was a belief that God had marked his creations with a sign or signature to indicate their purpose. A plant with heart-shaped leaves must be good. For the heart, the gnarled, jointed appearance of Solomon's seal root meant it was a treatment for mending broken bones. It's a beautifully simple idea, a sort of divine scavenger hunt for cures. It's also, from a modern perspective, like thinking that eating a pretzel will help you with your yoga poses. Historians and botanists often debate how much of the perceived effectiveness of these herbal remedies was due to active chemical compounds, and many of these plants do have active compounds versus the powerful placebo effect in a population that deeply believed in them. When the learned apothecary, a figure of immense authority, hands you a carefully prepared mixture and tells you with utter confidence that it will heal you, your belief alone is a powerful medicine. The apothecary has now assembled a small pile of dried leaves and flowers on a piece of clean paper. The colors are a muted tapestry of greens, yellows, and whites, and the combined scent is complexer, little sweet, a little bitter, a little spicy. He carefully funnels the mixture into a small pouch for you. This is the first step of your cure. It's gentle, it's natural, and it feels rooted in a kind of common sense you can understand. You are to take it home, steep it in hot water, and drink it 3 times a day. As he folds the paper, however, you get the distinct feeling this is only the beginning. These garden herbs are the advance guard, the gentle opening salvo in the war against your unbalanced humors. And you can't help but wonder what other weapons he has waiting on those shelves. He hands you the small paper pouch, its contents rustling softly. Steep a spoonful in a cup of boiling water each morning and evening, he instructs. Then he leans forward slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a crucial secret. And for each cup, he adds, stir in a generous spoonful of honey. Not just for the taste. The honey itself is a balm for the throat. He pauses, then continues. If the fever returns, have your wife soak a cloth in vinegar and water and lay it on your brow. It will help draw out the heat. Suddenly, the neat line between his professional shop and your own kitchen pantry begins to blur. His prescription isn't a sealed finished product. It's a set of instructions, a recipe that relies on you having the basic building blocks of domestic medicine already at home, before you ever decided to spend your hard-earned shillings in this shop. Your first line of defense was undoubtedly the kitchen. For colonial families, the pantry was a pharmacy, and the woman of the house was its chief practitioner. His advice taps directly into this world of household knowledge. Historians and medical anthropologists continue to explore the complex relationship between the official medicine of the apothecary and the domestic medicine practiced by women in the home, debating whether they were seen as cooperative or competing traditions. Right now, it feels like a partnership. He provides the specialized herbs, you provide the staples. Honey, the first ingredient he mentioned, is a cornerstone of this practice. You think of the earthenware crock of dark, fragrant honey in your own pantry. For the apothecary, it's not just a sweetener. It's a powerful agent in its own right. He knows it can soothe a raw throat and quiet a cough, and that it helps preserve the herbal mixtures he prepares. Without understanding the science of microbes, he knows from pure experience that a salve made with honey helps keep a wound clean and encourages healing. It is one of nature's most perfect medicines, useful, plentiful, and, most importantly, palatable. Then there's the vinegar. He didn't specify, but he meant the cloudy, amber-colored apple cider vinegar that every household kept in a cask. It was the all-purpose fluid of colonial life. They used it to preserve vegetables, to clean surfaces, and to add a tangy bite to their cooking. Medicinally, it was just as versatile. They believed its sharp, acidic nature could cut through the thickest phlegm and kill worms in the gut. Inhaling its steam was thought to clear the head, and as he advised, a vinegar-soaked compress was the go-to method for cooling a fever. It was the colonial equivalent of that one friend who thinks a single essential oil can fix a broken leg, a broken heart, and the national debt. As you stand there, you recall other kitchen remedies your grandmother swore by. She would have already insisted on a roasted onion poultice for your chest. You can almost smell it now, the sweet sulphurous scent of a large onion, baked until soft, then mashed and wrapped in a warm linen cloth. Placed on your chest, it was believed to have a powerful drawing quality, pulling the sickness right out through the skin. Or perhaps she would have recommended the infamous onion sock. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. You'd slice an onion, put it in one of your socks, and tie the whole fragrant bundle around your neck before bed. It might not cure your cough, but it's a guaranteed method for maintaining personal space. And if your cough were accompanied by aches and chills, the first thing your wife would have made is a mustard plaster. She'd mix ground mustard seed with flour and a little water to form a thick, pungent paste. Spread it on a rag and lay it across your back or chest. Within minutes, your skin would begin to tingle, then burn, growing bright red under the plaster. The sensation is intensely uncomfortable, but the theory was sound in a way. It was the heat and irritation on the surface were thought to draw blood away from the deeper inflammation in your lungs, providing a sense of relief. It was the 18th century version of the no pain, no gain philosophy. A belief that if your skin wasn't bright red and screaming, the medicine clearly wasn't working hard enough. You nod at the apothecary, clutching your pouch of herbs. His advice makes sense to you, layered as it is upon a lifetime of seeing these simple kitchen staples used as medicine. You are armed not just with his expertise, but with the collective wisdom of your own household. You pay him his fee, significant sum, but one you hope is a worthy investment in your health. You turn to leave, the little bell above the door announcing your departure. As you step back out into the muddy street and the fading afternoon light, the cool air feels good on your face. You have your instructions, a plan of action that begins with tea and honey. It feels gentle, logical, and safe. But in the back of your mind, a quiet question lingers. What if it's not enough? What if the garden and the pantry fail? That's when you'd have to return for the stronger, stranger, and far more expensive remedies lurking on his highest shelves. A few days pass. The horehound syrup makes you grimace, the peppermint tea is pleasant enough, and the vinegar-soaked cloths provide fleeting moments of relief. But the deep, rattling cough remains your unwelcome lodger. It has, if anything, settled deeper into your chest, and the feverish haze now lingers all day. The garden has been consulted, the pantry has been raided, and both have been found wanting. With a heavy heart and a lighter coin purse, you find yourself pushing open the apothecary's door once more, the little bell sounding less like a cheerful tinkle and more like a toll of defeat. The apothecary listens to your update, his expression unreadable. He nods slowly, his gaze drifting from your face to the highest, most distant shelves in his shop. This is the moment you are afraid of. The simple, inexpensive remedies have failed. Now, you're entering the next tier of treatment, a tier that connects your small, provincial town to the vast, dangerous, and incredibly lucrative world of global trade. He is about to draw upon his arsenal of exotic imports, the spices and barks that have traveled for months or even years over treacherous seas, their value increasing with every mile. He turns and retrieves a heavy, locked wooden box from under the counter. The key he uses is smaller and more ornate than a simple door key. He opens the lid, and even from where you stand, a new scent cuts through the shop's already complex aroma. It's a warm, sweet, and powerful wave of cinnamon, clove, and something else, richly aromatic and deeply foreign. These aren't just flavorings for holiday baking. In the 18th century, these are potent medicines. In the language of humors, they are the heavy artillery. They are intensely hot and dry, the perfect weapons against your stubborn, cold, and wet affliction. He explains that he will prepare a new electuary for you, a medicinal paste made with honey or syrup. But this time, the active ingredients will be far more precious. He takes out a delicate set of scales and, using a tiny spoon, weighs out a small amount of reddish-brown powder, cinnamon, not the common cassia, but true cinnamon from Ceylon, a spice that has passed through the hands of countless merchants on its way from an island in the Indian Ocean to this counter. Next, he adds a few dried flower buds that look like tiny, dark nails. These are cloves from the legendary spiced islands of modern-day Indonesia. For centuries, the trade in these spices was brutally controlled, first by the Portuguese and then by the Dutch, who guarded their monopoly with a ruthlessness that would make a modern-day cartel blush. They were, at times, literally worth their weight in gold. To this, he might add a grating of nutmeg, another prize from the same islands. Wealthy individuals often carried their own personal nutmeg in a small silver case with a tiny grater, ready for any culinary or medical emergency. It was the 18th century equivalent of carrying your own personal hot sauce, but infinitely more pretentious. Historians of trade and medicine often debate the true value of these spices. Were they primarily luxury goods whose high price created a powerful placebo effect? Or were their inherent chemical properties the main driver of their widespread use as medicine? As you watch him carefully measure out the tiny, precious pile of powder, you suspect the answer is a bit of both. He gets a certain twinkle in his eye as he reaches for these jars. It's the same look a modern mechanic gets right before telling you the problem isn't your spark plugs, but something that sounds much more complicated and expensive. You begin to do the mental math, calculating the cost of this new treatment, and you start to wonder if a cough is really so bad after all. It's the colonial version of seeing the price of a prescription and thinking, well, maybe I don't need to see in color this month. The most important imported drug in his entire shop, however, was one you prayed you'd never need. This was the famous Peruvian bark, or the bark of a tree from the Andes Mountains in South America, its trade controlled by the Spanish. It was the first and only effective treatment for the recurring, deadly fevers of malaria, known then as the ague. Its active ingredient, quinine, was a genuine miracle drug in an age of medical guesswork. Its story is one of global intrigue, of Jesuits, smugglers, and competing empires, all vying for control of this miraculous substance. Its price was astronomical, but for a man on his deathbed from fever, it was priceless. Your ailment, thankfully, doesn't seem to require that particular cure. The apothecary finishes mixing the dark, spicy powder into a thick honey paste, scraping every last precious grain into a small ceramic pot. The resulting concoction smells powerfully medicinal, warm and pungent. It smells expensive. He hands it to you with a gravity that was absent during your last visit. This isn't a gentle suggestion from the garden. This is a serious, costly assault on your illness. You are to take a small amount twice a day. As you accept the pot, you feel the weight of it in your hand. Not just the physical weight, but the weight of hope, of expense, and of the dawning realization that if this doesn't work, the next steps in your treatment will likely become far less pleasant. The expensive, spicy paste is a failure. Each dose is a small, cloying battle, and it achieves nothing. Your cough has deepened into a painful, body-racking spasm that leaves you breathless. The fever is no longer a gentle wave, but a constant, roaring fire. Your world has shrunk too. The four walls of your bedroom, the sheets damp with sweat, the air thick with the scent of sickness. This time, you don't go to the apothecary. He is summoned to you. He arrives with his familiar bag, but his face is grim. The time for gentle persuasion is over. He sits by your bedside and explains the situation in his calm, unwavering voice. The humors, he tells you, are not just imbalanced. They are corrupted. Your excess phlegm has become malignant, and it is poisoning the other fluids of your body. The gentle warming spices and herbs were not enough to correct the problem from within. Now, the enemy must be driven out. This is the moment the apothecary's philosophy shifts from balancing to eviction. This is the beginning of what would later be called heroic medicine, the belief that a serious disease demands a violent, aggressive response. He has stopped trying to coax the illness out and has decided to serve it a formal eviction notice, followed by throwing all of its belongings out onto the street. His new plan is a two-pronged assault, designed to expel the corruption from your body by any means necessary. He intends to open the floodgates from above and below. He starts with an emetic, a substance designed to make you vomit. From his bag, he takes a small folded paper packet containing a whitish powder. It could be ipecac, a root from South America, or it could be the far more common and potent tartar emetic antimony, potassium tartrate. He mixes a small amount into a cup of water, the powder dissolving into a cloudy, unappetizing solution. He tells you to drink it all at once. The taste is metallic and foul, and the effect is almost immediate. Your stomach clenches violently. A wave of nausea so profound it makes the room spin washes over you. Within minutes, you are retching uncontrollably, your body convulsing with a force that feels entirely alien. The apothecary watches this display with a clinical, almost approving eye. To him, this is not a horrifying side effect. It is the entire point. Each spasm, each heave, is the body purging itself of the foul humors that have taken root in your stomach. The goal is to make you vomit so prodigiously you might expel the disease, your lunch from last week, and possibly a few of your long-held regrets. The ordeal leaves you gasping, drenched in sweat, with a raw throat and a feeling of being turned completely inside out. But he is not finished. While you are still reeling, he prepares the second phase of the attack, a powerful purgative. He opens a small tin to reveal several large, chalky pills. These are his bilious pills, and their key ingredient is a substance called calomel. Calomel is mercury chloride, a potent, toxic heavy metal. In the 18th century, it was considered a miracle drug, a cure-all of unparalleled power, championed by the most famous physicians of the day, including Philadelphia's Dr. Benjamin Rush. They believed it was the ultimate weapon for scouring the liver and bowels of tainted bile and other humoral sludge. It's a chilling reminder that just because a learned man in a waistcoat says something with absolute confidence, it doesn't mean you should voluntarily ingest poison. You swallow the pills with a trembling hand. The hours that follow are a miserable blur of cramping, sweating, and repeated urgent trips to the chamber pot. The purgative works its way through your system with a brutal efficiency, leaving you feeling scoured, hollowed out, and profoundly weak. A doctor of this era might even inspect the results, believing the color and nature of the evacuation was a diagnostic tool, a way to see if the corrupted humors were successfully being driven from their stronghold in your bowels. Historians still debate whether the widespread use of such heroic measures did more harm than good, with many arguing that the resulting dehydration, mineral loss, and overall weakness were often more lethal than the original diseases they were meant to treat. Lying in your bed, shivering and utterly drained, you can easily believe it. You feel as though you've been in a fistfight with your own body, and you're not sure who won. The cure has been a torment, an ordeal that has left you weaker than the illness ever did. The apothecary checks on you one last time before he leaves, nodding with satisfaction. He believes he has broken the back of the disease, that the great purge has cleansed your system. But as you drift into a shallow, exhausted sleep, you can't help but feel that something even more fearsome is waiting just around the corner. If this, too, should fail, the great purge has left you scoured and empty, but the sickness, a stubborn and unwelcome tenant, remains. You are weaker than ever, a ghost haunting your own bed. The fever still clings to you, and each cough feels like a hammer blow to your ribs. When the apothecary returns, his face is set like stone. He has thrown the full force of his internal remedies at your ailment, and it has not yielded. There is only one path left, the most ancient and trusted procedure in his entire medical arsenal. He has tried to drive the bad humors out through the body's natural gates. Now he must open a new one. He is going to bleed you. The logic, to him, is irrefutable. Your blood, the very river of your life, is clearly corrupted or in excess. It is either too hot, too thick, or contaminated by the malignant phlegm that started this whole ordeal. The only way to restore balance is through direct removal. It's like trying to fix a sputtering engine by draining some of the oil. The theory is flawed, but it is practiced with absolute, unwavering faith. This single procedure, bloodletting, has been a cornerstone of medicine. For thousands of years, a trusted cure for everything from a headache to the plague. From his bag, he removes his phlebotomy kit. You watch as he lays out a clean linen cloth and places his tools upon it. There is a small, sharp blade called a lancet, its steel tip honed to a wicked point. There is a roll of cloth to use as a tourniquet, and there is a shallow pewter bowl, its inside marked with graduated lines to measure the quantity of blood removed. He rolls up your sleeve, his touch surprisingly gentle. He ties the tourniquet around your upper arm, and you make a fist, as instructed. The veins on the inside of your elbow bulge, dark and prominent. He selects a vein, then takes the lancet in his hand. There is no sterilization, no alcohol swab. Such concepts are far in the future. He simply positions the tip and, with a quick, practiced flick of his wrist, makes a small, deep incision. The initial prick is sharp, but it's quickly overshadowed by the sight that follows. A trickle of your own blood, dark and warm, wells up from the cut and begins to stream into the waiting bowl below. He watches the flow intently, his expression one of deep concentration. The metallic smell of the blood, faint at first, grows stronger in the still air of the room. You watch the level rise in the bowl 4 ounces, then 6, then 8. With each ounce that leaves your body, you feel a growing sense of lightheadedness. a strange, floaty disconnect from the world. If your ailment had been more localized, or if you were a child or a frail woman, he might have chosen a different method. He might have brought out a glass jar filled with water and a dozen or so dark, writhing shapes. Leeches. These medicinal bloodsuckers, Herudo medicinalis, were considered a gentler way to remove blood from a specific area, like the temples for a headache or the chest for lung inflammation. They were the original form of microdosing, but for blood removal, and they had the advantage of being both a tool and a tidy-upper in one, alongside bleeding. He might have also opted for a therapy of blistering. For this, he would apply a plaster made with a caustic substance, most often cantharides, derived from a crushed beetle known as Spanish fly. Applied to your chest or back, this plaster would raise a large, painful, fluid-filled blister over several hours. The theory was that the blister acted as a magnet for the offending humors, drawing the poison out of your lungs and into the blister, which could then be lanced and drained. It was a novel approach to healing, giving you a fresh new agony to distract you from the old one. You may have seen the symbol for this entire family of treatments without ever knowing it. The iconic redand white barber's pole is a direct relic of when barbers also served as surgeons. The red represented the blood, the white represented the bandages, and the pole itself was what the patient gripped to make their veins stand out. Scholars and physicians today still debate the precise role this kind of aggressive treatment played in history, most famously in the death of George Washington, arguing whether the massive blood loss he endured was the primary cause of his death, or merely an ineffective standard of care treatment for an already fatal throat infection. The apothecary decides that 10 ounces is sufficient for now. He removes the tourniquet and the bleeding slows. He presses a small pad of linen to the cut and bandages your arm tightly. He examines the blood in the bowl, swirling it slightly, observing its color and how it coagulates, looking for signs of the corruption he is so certain is there. You lie back against your pillows, your head swimming. The world seems distant and muffled. You are not cured. You are simply drained. You have been purged, poisoned, and now bled, all in the name of balance. You have experienced the full force of heroic medicine, and as you close your eyes, you are left to wonder if there is enough of you left to survive the cure. You lie in the semi-darkness of your room, a ghost in your own life. The bloodletting has left you profoundly weak, with a ringing in your ears and a chill that has nothing to do with the fever, which, impossibly, still burns. The apothecary's heroic interventions have failed. He has purged you, poisoned you, and drained you, and the sickness remains, coiled in your lungs like a serpent. Your wife, her face etched with fear and a growing anger at the celebrated man of science, has made a decision. She has turned away from the shop with its Latin labels and terrifying tools, and sought help from a different source. There's a soft knock on the bedroom door, and a woman enters whom you know only as Goodwife Miller, a widow who lives down the lane. She is not a formal practitioner. She has no shop, no fancy books, no air of grave authority. Her expertise comes from a different kind of education, a lifetime of tending to her own children, of sitting with sick neighbors, of listening to the wisdom of her mother and grandmother before her. She is the woman healer next door, the keeper of a practical, compassionate knowledge that has been passed from woman to woman for centuries. She shows up without a single leech or a jar of mercury. You're just relieved she doesn't immediately ask to see your tongue. Her approach is a world away from the apothecaries. She doesn't talk of humors or malignant phlegm. She simply pulls a stool to your bedside, lays a cool, dry hand on your forehead, and asks your wife in a low voice, "How is his breathing? When did he last take nourishment?" Her concern is not with violently expelling a theoretical substance, but with supporting your body's own fight. Where the apothecary's approach was a declaration of war, hers is an offer of alliance. She listens to the shallow, ragged sound of your breath. Then, instead of reaching for a lancet, she asks for a kettle of boiling water and a bowl. From a cloth pouch in her apron, she takes a pinch of dried thyme and drops it into the bowl, then pours the steaming water over it. The rising vapor carries a clean, earthy, and wonderfully pungent scent. She has your wife help you lean over the bowl with a sheet draped over your head, instructing you to breathe in the steam. The warm, moist air penetrates your aching chest, and for the first time in weeks, a cough produces a sense of relief rather than simple, racking pain. It's a shockingly gentle intervention. This is the other side of colonial medicine. While men like the apothecary were reading the ancient Greek texts of Galen, women were compiling their own medical knowledge in handwritten household books. This is a mainstream historical fact of the era. These receipt books were vital family documents passed down through generations. A book might contain a recipe for a fine custard right next to a receipt for a fever-breaking tea. A method for making soap could share a page with a salve for burns. There was no firm line between the kitchen and the pharmacy, between nourishment and medicine. The most visible and respected of these female practitioners were the midwives. They were true specialists, possessing an incredible depth of knowledge about childbirth, a dangerous and exclusively female-run event in this time. They managed everything from prenatal care to the delivery itself and postpartum recovery, using a combination of practical skill and herbal wisdom that was far outside the typical apothecary's experience. Historians fiercely debate the dynamic between these university-trained male physicians and the community-taught female healers. Was the eventual professionalization of medicine an act of progress, or did it represent the deliberate suppression and marginalization of centuries of effective female medical knowledge? Goodwife Miller's care is simple, and it is humane. She has your wife prepare a thin, savory broth, insisting you take a few spoonfuls. The body needs fuel for its fight, she says simply. There is no talk of purges to cleanse your bowels, only of simple food to give you strength. After your steam inhalation, she mixes a bit of beeswax and mutton tallow with turpentine to make a pungent rubbing salve for your chest. Its scent sharp and piercing, but its warmth soothing. Her approach is less about curing the disease and more about caring for the patient, a distinction that seems to have been lost on the apothecary. You are not a faulty container of humours to her. You are a sick man who needs comfort. As you lie back, breathing a little easier, a faint hope begins to stir, a feeling you had long since abandoned. Perhaps this gentle path, this wisdom of the kitchen and the women who ran it, was the help you needed all along. Goodwife Miller's gentle care continues. The nourishing broth and the thyme-scented steam have not produced a miracle cure, but they have stopped your terrifying decline. You are holding steady. One afternoon, she brings you a different kind of tea. It's thicker than the others, almost syrupy, with a mild, earthy taste. Slippery elm bark, she tells you, stirring the warm, viscous liquid, a gift from this new land. The natives have used it for sore throats and coughs since time immemorial. In that moment, another, entirely different branch of medicine enters your sick room. One that has nothing to do with ancient Greece or European kitchens. This is the wisdom of the very soil you live on. When colonists like you arrived in North America, you entered a completely alien botanical world. The plants were different, the seasons were different, and the illnesses were sometimes different too. While you brought your seeds and your European herbal knowledge with you, you quickly realized that the people who had thrived here for millennia possessed a sophisticated understanding of the local flora that you lacked. The relationship with this knowledge was complex. It was sometimes traded for, sometimes observed from afar, and often it was simply taken. The colonists had a straightforward, if uncharitable, policy for new information. If it works, it's ours now. The apothecary, with his formal education, might have looked down on this knowledge as primitive folklore. But pragmatic healers like Goodwife Miller, and indeed many colonists struggling to survive, were more open-minded. They saw what worked. One of the most important remedies passed from Native Americans to the colonists was witch hazel. Tribes in the Northeast had long been making a decoction from the twigs and bark of the Hamamillus virginiana shrub, using the astringent liquid to reduce swelling, treat sores, and soothe irritated skin. The fact that witch hazel remains a staple in modern medicine cabinets is a direct, living legacy of this shared knowledge. The slippery elm tea you are now drinking is another prime example. Native healers knew that the inner bark of this elm tree, when shredded and mixed with water, created a thick, soothing mucus. It was perfect for coating a raw throat, calming a cough, or even being used as a poultice on a painful wound. You're essentially told to drink something with the consistency of a light wallpaper paste. But after the ordeal of mercury pills and bloodletting, a bit of soothing slime feels like a day at the spa. This process of adoption was constant. Colonists learned, for instance, about the power of the purple coneflower, echinacea, a plant used by plains tribes as a universal remedy for everything from snake bites to fevers. They learned about the vibrant yellow root of golden seal, used as an antiseptic eye wash and a potent anti-inflammatory. This was knowledge born not from a 2,000-year-old text, but from millennia of direct observation, of trial and error, of a deep ecological connection to the land. Historians and ethnobotanists continue to debate the extent and nature of this knowledge transfer, questioning how much was shared willingly versus how much was appropriated, and how profoundly Native American medicine reshaped colonial, domestic practices. Sometimes the colonists learned not from the people, but from the animals. A quirky but common practice was to observe which plants sick or injured animals sought out. This idea that animals possess an instinctive knowledge of herbal medicine is now studied under the fancy name of zoopharmacognosy. Back then, it was simple, practical observation. It's a bold medical strategy, of course, basing your family's health on what a deer decides to chew on. I saw a bear rubbing this leaf on its wound. I'm sure it'll be fine for little Timmy's rash. The underlying philosophy was also profoundly different. While the apothecary saw your body as a system of humors to be forced into balance, Native American healing often took a more holistic view, treating the spirit and the body as one. A cure might involve a specific herb, but it could also involve ritual, prayer, and a focus on restoring a person's harmony with their community and the natural world. It was a far cry from being bled into a pewter bowl to fix an excess of phlegm. As you sip the slippery elm tea, you can feel it coating your raw, irritated throat, bringing a quiet, substantive relief. This remedy, born of this continent, feels different. It lacks the violence of the apothecary's cures and the simple familiarity of the kitchen ones. It feels like a secret, something ancient and powerful. It is a testament to the fact that in this new world, wisdom was not confined to the pages of European books. It was in the soil, in the hands of the midwives, and in the knowledge of the people who understood this land long before you ever arrived. And for the first time, you feel a genuine shift. The fever seems a little less fierce, the cough a little less deep. You are finally, slowly, beginning to heal. Weeks have passed. The combination of Goodwife Miller's gentle care and the potent, borrowed remedies of the native soil has worked. The fever broke, the cough subsided, and your strength, slowly but surely, has returned. Your brush with death has left you with a lingering curiosity about the man who so confidently and so wrongly tried to cure you. One day, you find yourself back at his shop, not as a patient, but as an observer. Perhaps you're there to purchase a bit of spice for your wife. But when the apothecary sees you, hale and healthy, he offers a rare, thin smile. Maybe it's your genuine interest, or maybe he's just lonely, but he invites you to step behind the counter into his inner sanctum. The workspace is a world away from the tidy public-facing shop. Here, the air is even thicker with smells. The counter is stained with the ghosts of 1,000 potions, and a collection of brass, ceramic, and glass mortar and pestles of varying sizes stands ready for action. This is the laboratory, the engine, room of his trade, where raw nature is processed into pills, potions, and poultices. He gestures to a heavy ceramic mortar filled with chunks of a hard, woody root. "Grind this to a fine powder for me," he says, handing you the heavy pestle. An old woman down the road has the rheumatism. You take the pestle, and as you begin the rhythmic work of crushing the root, you finally understand the sound you first heard upon entering this shop. It's a physical, demanding process. The thump as you crush the large pieces, followed by the circular scrape as you grind the smaller bits against the rough ceramic wall. Your task is to reduce the stubborn, fibrous root into a powder as fine as flour. The dosage, he explains, is determined by volume or weight, but its effectiveness depends entirely on how well it is ground. A coarse powder won't dissolve properly in the stomach or release its medicinal properties. The precision your grandmother uses for her secret cookie recipe, a pinch of this, a handful of that, is charming for baking, but a little more concerning when the ingredients are potent drugs. Once you've finished, he shows you how he would turn this powder into pills. He takes a portion of your handiwork and mixes it with a sticky, dark substance, an extract of licorice root, kneading it on a ceramic tile until it forms a stiff, doughy mass. It looks remarkably like he's making bread dough for tiny, bitter loaves. He then rolls this mass out into a long, thin snake and lays it on a special grooved pill tile. With a single downward press of a special cutter, he divides the snake into 24 equal segments. Your job, he says, is to roll each tiny segment between your thumb and forefinger into a perfect sphere. It's like making meatballs, but instead of creating a family dinner, you're rolling small, dusty spheres of questionable medical efficacy. It was a common and historically documented practice for a particularly wealthy or squeamish patient. He might have added one final flourish. He shows you a small pot of finely powdered cinnamon. By rolling the sticky, freshly made pills in the powder, he gives them a pleasant coating. He tells you that for the truly aristocratic, pills were sometimes coated in actual gold or silver leaf. This did nothing for the medicine, of course, but it was the height of medical luxury, a way to show you could afford the very best, even for treatments that would pass through you in a day. It seems less about health and more about being able to boast that you have the most expensive waste in town. Not everything is made into a pill. He points to a row of large glass jars on a high shelf, filled with various herbs steeping in dark liquids. Those, he explains, are tinctures, where a simple infusion or tea uses hot water to extract a plant's properties for immediate use. A tincture uses alcohol, usually a strong brandy or rum, to create a much more potent and long-lasting extract over weeks or months. This was the colonial version of a high-potency liquid supplement. You look at the array of tools, the meticulous, labor-intensive processes, and the sheer breadth of raw materials. Historians of pharmacy still debate the consistency and dosage, accuracy of these handmade medicines. Without standardized manufacturing, a pill from this shop could be wildly different in strength and size from one made by an apothecary in the next town over. So much depended on the skill and even the honesty of the individual practitioner. As you finish rolling the last of the dusty little pills, you have a newfound appreciation for the craft. The science may have been based on a fantasy, but the daily work of being an apothecary was a demanding, hands-on skill, a true art form in its own right. Your newfound appreciation for the apothecary's craft is tempered by a chilling thought. You've just helped him create a relatively benign pill from a simple root. But your eyes drift back to the shelves, to that jar you saw on your very first visit, the one with the mysterious label, mummies. You point to the jar of dark, granular powder and ask him what it is. He looks at you, a flicker of pride in his eyes, as if revealing a prized vintage. That, he says, is powdered Egyptian mummy. You suddenly feel very, very grateful that your cough was cured by slippery elm and not, as it turns out, by ancient Persian dust. You have just stumbled into the strangest corner of the colonial medicine cabinet, where science, tradition, and outright magic bleed into one another. The use of mummies is a grim but true historical fact. For centuries, it was one of the most highly prized substances in European medicine. The theory was that the bitumen and resins used by the ancient Egyptians to preserve the dead must contain a powerful, life-preserving essence. It was prescribed for everything from headaches and bruises to epilepsy and plague. The demand was so high, it created a gruesome international trade, with countless Egyptian tombs being plundered. When the supply of pharaohs ran low, enterprising forgers would create counterfeit mummies using the bodies of executed criminals or beggars, drying them in the sun to pass them off as the genuine article. Your gaze widens as you now look at the shelves with a new, more suspicious eye. You start to notice other oddities. There is a jar labeled oculi croum, crab's eyes, he translates. You picture tiny, dried eyeballs and shudder, but he chuckles and explains. They aren't eyes at all, but small, chalky discs of calcium carbonate found in the stomachs of crayfish. They were ground into a powder and used as an antacid, one of the few remedies from this bizarre collection that actually worked based on a simple chemical reaction. It's a profound relief to learn crab's eyes aren't literal eyes. It slightly restores your faith in this practice, which was hanging on by a very thin, mercury-laced thread. Then he shows you something truly outlandish. From a small, dark box, he pulls out a wisp of greyish-green moss. This is Uzenia, he says, but its true power comes from where it is grown. He explains that the most potent moss is that which is scraped from an unburied human skull, preferably the skull of a criminal who died a violent death. This was known as skull moss, based on a principle called sympathetic magic. The belief was that a plant from a head could cure ailments of the head, like seizures or migraines. It was also thought to be a powerful agent to stop bleeding, the violent death of the donor somehow imbuing the moss with a power over life and blood. The sourcing was, to put it mildly, macabre. Just pop down to the local gallows and grab some moss off that highwayman, would you? My next patient has dizzy spells. It puts a new spin on the phrase locally sourced ingredients. The cabinet of curiosities continues. He might have dried toads, which were worn as amulets, or powdered into potions to draw out poisons and plague. There could be viper fat, used as a base for ointments, or even viper wine, where a live snake was drowned in a bottle of wine. The resulting brew thought to cure everything from poor eyesight to snake bite itself, on the principle that like cures, like historians of science and folklore still debate where the line between medicine and magic truly lay in the 18th century mind. Did an apothecary using skull moss see it as a purely pharmacological agent, or was he consciously tapping into a world of folk belief and powerful symbolism? Yet amidst the magical and the macabre, there were moments of accidental genius. The apothecary might mention, in passing, the curious healing power of maggots. It had been observed for centuries on battlefields and in makeshift hospitals that wounds which became infested with maggots often healed cleaner and faster than those that did not. While they didn't understand why, they saw the results. The maggots were eating the dead, decaying flesh, preventing the spread of what they would have called corruption and what we would call gangrene. It was an early, misunderstood form of maggot debridement therapy, a bizarre but effective treatment hidden in plain sight. You finally take your leave of the apothecary, your head spinning with images of mummies, moss, and crayfish stomachs. You have seen the full breadths of his pharmacopoeia, from the simple garden mint to the dust of a long-dead king. It is a strange and unsettling mix of the logical and the ludicrous. As you walk home, you feel the simple solidity of the ground beneath your feet and take a deep, clear breath, profoundly thankful for the gentle, rational, and decidedly non-magical cure that brought you back from the brink. Your journey through the world of colonial medicine has, thankfully, been one of internal medicine, a battle of humors fought with herbs, spices, and poisons. But as you walk home from the apothecary's shop, your mind still reeling from the thought of powdered mummies, you see a reminder that sickness is not the only threat. A carter, his wagon wheel shattered in a deep rut, lies on the ground, his leg bent at an angle that is sickeningly wrong. In a world of manual labor, sharp tools, and unpredictable animals, physical injury was a constant, terrifying risk. And for that, too, you would be carried to the very same man, the apothecary, who would have to trade his philosopher's hat for a blacksmith's apron. Imagine, for a moment, that you were the one who took the fall. The treatment for your broken leg would be swift, brutal, and agonizingly simple. There is no operating theatre, no X-ray to guide the work, and certainly no anesthetic beyond a large swig of rum and a leather strap to bite down on. The apothecary's job is to manually, physically, force the two ends of your broken bone back into alignment. His hands, so deft at rolling tiny pills, must now be iron clamps. You would feel an incredible, grinding pressure, a pain that whites out your vision, and then a sickening clunk as the bone is set. The apothecary's technique for this was less a medical procedure and more like an extreme one-time chiropractic adjustment. Once the bone is set, he must immobilize it. Forget a modern plaster cast. He would prepare a set of wooden splints, perhaps carved himself, padding them with soft moss or scraps of old linen. These would be laid along your leg and then bound up as tightly as you could bear with long strips of cloth. The goal is the same as it is to date, to keep the bone perfectly still so it can knit back together, but the execution is a testament to making do. Your leg would be a prison of wood and cloth for weeks, and you could only hope that he set it straight, or imagine a different accident, a deep gash from a clumsy axe stroke. The first priority is to stop the bleeding. If it's a clean cut, he might stitch it closed, using a simple curved needle and a thread of silk or linen, each pull of the thread sending a fresh jolt of pain through you. Then he would turn to his chemical arsenal. The wound would be cleaned, not with a gentle antiseptic, but likely with more rum or vinegar. Then he might pack it with one of his favorite substances, turpentine. Yes, the same stuff used to make varnish and paint thinner. It was a powerful, naturally derived antiseptic and styptic, meaning it helped stop bleeding. The moment the sticky, pungent resin hit your raw flesh, it would burn with an intensity that would make you cry out, but it was often effective. On the bright side, your wound is now sterile and you smell faintly of a pine forest. If the bleeding was too severe for turpentine, or if he were performing a dreaded amputation, he would resort to the most dramatic tool in his surgical kit. Cautery. You would hear the hiss and pop of the fire in his brazier as he heats a flat-tipped iron until it glows a terrifying cherry red. The smell of hot metal would fill the air. The apothecary, his face grim with concentration, would then press the searing hot iron to the source of the bleeding. The sound is a sharp, sickening sizzle, and the smell of your own burnt flesh is something you would never forget. It is a horrifyingly effective way to seal blood vessels. Historians of military medicine still debate the survival rates of such procedures, but in a world without antibiotics, the immediate, brutal finality of cautery may have saved more lives from blood loss than it cost in shock and pain. Even a simple kitchen burn required his attention. For this, he might prepare a Caron oil dressing, a creamy emulsion made by shaking together linseed oil and lime water. This was a folk remedy turned standard treatment, and it felt wonderfully cool and soothing when applied. Unfortunately, we now know it's one of the worst things to put on a severe burn, as it traps heat, promotes infection, and is nearly impossible to clean off. It was a well-intentioned mistake, a quirky tidbit of medical history that likely led to a great deal of suffering and scarring. As you look at the injured carter being carried towards the apothecary's shop, you understand that this single practitioner had to be two different men. He was the thoughtful, philosophical physician, pondering the esoteric balance of your four humors, and he was the battlefield surgeon, a man of strong arms and stronger stomach, ready to wrestle with broken bones and seal bleeding flesh with fire. It was a profession that demanded both a scholar's mind and a butcher's resolve. You sit by your own hearth, the fire casting a warm, dancing light across the room. Outside, the sounds of the evening are settling in, but here, inside, there is a profound peace. You have been through an ordeal that feels like a dark, terrifying dream. Surviving a colonial illness, you realize, was a two-part victory. First, you had to survive the disease itself. Second, and in many ways the more daunting challenge, you had to survive the cure. Now, in the quiet safety of your own home, you reflect on the sheer sensory and emotional assault of being a patient in this era. Your memory of the ordeal is a collage of tastes. You can still conjure the profound, lingering bitterness of the horehound syrup. You remember the foul, metallic temps of the emetic, a taste that promised nothing but violence. You recall the cloying, spicy heat of the expensive electuary, a flavor that tasted of desperation and dwindling coin. You can almost feel the dry, chalky texture of the hand-rolled pills, which you had to swallow with a gulp of water and a prayer. You've consumed things that would make a goat reconsider its diet. The primary qualification for a colonial medicine, it seems, was that it must taste of bitter, chemical-laced regret. How beautiful, then, was the contrast of that final, soothing, slippery elm tea from Goodwife Miller, its simple, earthy flavor, the taste of actual healing. Then there were the smells. You can never again walk into a room where cinnamon and cloves are simmering without being transported back to the apothecary's shop, to that moment of hope and fear. You remember the sharp, clean scent of the thyme steam, a fragrance of gentle relief, and you can recall, with a visceral shudder, the imagined scent of the cauterizing iron, the acrid smell of burnt flesh, and the sharp taint of terror, a smell you were thankfully spared, but one that haunted the stories of injured neighbors. But more than the tastes or the smells, it was the feeling of profound uncertainty that defined the experience. Every cough, every fever, every ache carried with it a terrifying weight, because you knew how thin the veil was between life and death. The high rates of child mortality were a constant, grim reminder of medicine's limitations. Nearly every family had lost a child, a stark and ever-present historical fact that shaped their view of the world. To fall ill was to enter a lottery. You were basically a test audience for a 2,000-year-old medical theory with no online reviews to consult. 1 star, the leeches were fine, but the mercury pills were a bit much. Would not recommend. You had to surrender your body completely to the apothecary's certitude. You submitted to being purged until you were hollow, to being bled until you were faint, all based on a theory of invisible fluids you couldn't possibly comprehend. There was no second opinion, no alternative diagnosis beyond turning to folk healers who had their own set of beliefs. Sometimes, patients had their own ideas, believing their sickness was a sign of divine punishment, or even the result of a neighbor's curse. These personal beliefs, a quirky and deeply human part of the ordeal, added another layer of fear to the physical suffering. Historians of emotion still debate how people in the past truly perceived these harsh treatments. Did they view them with the same horror we do today, or was the acceptance of intense pain so ingrained in their worldview that a violent cure for a violent disease seemed perfectly logical? Lying in your bed, weak from the lancet, it didn't feel logical. It felt like a desperate, violent gamble, and through it all, there was the quiet, gnawing anxiety of the cost. The apothecary's time, the imported spices, the powerful chemical drugs, they all had a price. A serious illness was not just a medical crisis. It was a financial one, capable of plunging a family into debt for years. This gave every stage of your sickness a hard, monetary edge. You found yourself constantly weighing your symptoms against the contents of your purse. Now, sitting here, whole and healthy, the feeling that washes over you is one of simple, profound gratitude. You feel the solidness of the chair beneath you, the warmth of the fire on your skin, the easy rhythm of your own breathing. These simple, physical realities feel like luxuries. You survived. You navigated the terrifying landscape of heroic medicine, skirted the edges of magical potions and powdered mummies, and found your way back to health through a combination of luck, resilience, and the gentle wisdom of those who chose to comfort rather than conquer. It is a victory that feels quiet, personal, and incredibly precious. That feeling of precious, hard-won health stays with you. It changes how you see the world, making you keenly aware of the fragility of the human body and the terrifying inadequacy of the tools designed to mend it. As the years pass, you might catch whispers of new ideas floating across the Atlantic. From the great universities in Edinburgh, London, and Paris, in the back pages of a gazette, you might read a short column dismissing a newfangled theory or a strange discovery. You won't live to see the revolution these whispers will ignite, but you are living at the very beginning of the end for the 2,000-year reign of the four humours. The seeds of this revolution are being planted by men with new tools and new ways of seeing. In Europe, men are peering through ever-improving microscopes, revealing a hidden world teeming with what they call animalcules. They are present in water, in the soil, on your skin, and even in the plaque scraped from your teeth. The apothecary, if he ever looked through such a device, would likely dismiss it as a curiosity, perhaps declaring the tiny swimming creatures to be miniature humours. The idea that these microscopic beings could be the cause of disease is still a century away, a notion too bizarre for even a man who prescribes powdered mummy to accept. More importantly, the secrets of the human body are being laid bare on the dissection table. In London, the anatomist surgeons William and John Hunter are pioneering a new approach, insisting that medicine must be based on a deep understanding of human anatomy and pathology. By performing autopsies, they are beginning to link a patient's symptoms in life to the specific, observable damage to their organs in death. A cough is not an abstract imbalance of phlegm. It is caused by the visible tubercles riddling the lungs. This direct, evidence-based approach is the mortal enemy of humoral theory, replacing a philosophical system with physical fact. Simultaneously, the new science of chemistry is redefining the very nature of life. Men like Lavoisier are demonstrating that respiration is a form of combustion, a chemical process, not a cooling function for the heart's innate heat. The body is slowly being reimagined as a machine, a chemical factory, something that can be understood, measured, and perhaps, one day, truly fixed. But progress moves at a glacial pace. A new idea must be proposed, debated for 50 years, tested for another 50, and finally adopted about a decade after something even better has been discovered. Historians still debate how quickly these new scientific ideas actually replaced humoral theory in the daily practice of a colonial apothecary. The answer seems to be a long, slow fade, a period of decades where old and new ideas coexisted, with practitioners bleeding a patient in the morning and discussing chemical theories in the afternoon. As public faith in the old ways begins to waver, a new phenomenon emerges, the golden age of the patent medicine, with people growing skeptical of being bled and purged. A market opens for Dr. Wonderful's miraculous golden elixir, a secret formula promising to cure anything and everything with no pain and no fuss. These remedies, often just flavored alcohol with a good story and a clever label, were arguably safer than the mainstream medicine of the day. You, however, will live out your days in the world you know. Your children and grandchildren will still be treated with herbal teas, mustard plasters, and, when things turn dire, the familiar terror of the lancet and the purge. The apothecary's shop will remain the nexus of healing and hope in your town. But the change is coming. A great intellectual tide is turning, one that will eventually sweep away the humours, the leeches, and the mercury pills, replacing them with germs, cells, and chemicals. The journey is a long one, but it ends with a world where a simple cough is just a cough, and the cure is is no longer more dangerous than the disease. And so, our journey to the Colonial Apothecary shop comes to a close. The lingering scents of dried herbs and strange chemicals begin to fade, and the flickering candlelight of the 18th century dissolves back into the soft darkness of your own quiet room. The rhythmic scraping of the mortar and pestle, the sharp prick of the lancet, the crackle of the hearth fire, let them all recede now, becoming distant echoes, a story that has been told. You are far from that world of heroic cures and humoral theories. You are safe here, in the familiar comfort of your own bed, in the profound safety of the modern world. There are no threatening potions waiting for you, no prescriptions of mercury or mummy dust. There is only the gentle weight of your blankets, the soft support of your pillow, and the steady, easy rhythm of your own breath. Feel that simple, peaceful act of breathing, an act that requires no thought, no effort, just a gentle rise and fall, a quiet tide pulling you further and further away from the waking world, down into the calm and welcoming depths of sleep. Let the last remnants of the story drift away like smoke, leaving only a deep sense of peace and stillness in their place. Allow your mind to become quiet, your body to become heavy, as you surrender to the gentle descent into rest.